That morning was sunny and warm, typical of an autumn day in the small town of Maplewood. The smell of dry leaves and the gentle breeze brought a sense of renewal, but for me, it was merely a prelude to the unknown. I could hardly contain my excitement as I watched the old Victorian house rise before me, with its tall windows and creaky wooden porch. It felt like a dream, but there was also something unsettling in the air. "Look, Sarah. This house is amazing," my dad, Tom, said as he parked the car in front of the house. He jumped out of the driver's seat, his smile wide and contagious. "I think we're going to love living here." "It's beautiful, Dad," I replied, leaping out of the car and running toward the front door, my feet thumping against the creaking wooden floor. The sun illuminated the facade, highlighting the green and gold hues of the peeling paint. The place seemed to have stories to tell. My mom, Lisa, followed us, holding a cardboard box. She looked around with an expression that mixed excitement and concern. "I hope we can get everything in order quickly. We need to fix up a few things, especially the backyard," she said, casting a critical eye. I stepped into the house, crossing the entrance hall and admiring every detail. The walls were adorned with faded floral wallpaper, and the floors creaked beneath my weight. The scent of old wood and dust enveloped me, and I couldn't help but imagine the people who had lived there before. "Let's explore," I declared, driven by curiosity. My parents began unloading boxes, but I could hardly wait. I climbed the spiral staircase, each step echoing like a call to uncover the secrets of the house. The rooms were spacious, with windows that let in sunlight, and a sense of mystery lingered in the air. I entered one of the rooms, which seemed to have been an office, with a dusty bookshelf and a worn-out armchair. There must be a ton of stories here, I thought, running my fingers along the spines of the books. The house was perfect for playing hide-and-seek. But as I explored, a strange feeling began to settle in my chest. There was something in the air that made me uneasy. A sense that I was not alone. It must just be my imagination, I thought, forcing myself to dismiss the idea. That night, everything felt calm. I snuggled into my bed, surrounded by my toys, but I couldn't fall asleep. The silence of the house was oppressive, and every creak seemed amplified. Then I heard it. A soft crying, as if someone were calling for help, echoed from beneath my bed. My heart raced. "It's just the wind," I told myself, trying to convince myself. But as the sound persisted, curiosity and fear intertwined. "What is that?" I thought, inching closer to the edge of the bed. My eyes fixed on the darkness below. It must be just a dream. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains, and the crying had stopped. I got up, still haunted by the echo of the sound in my mind. "Hi, Dad." "Hi, Mom." I shouted as I descended the stairs, finding my parents in the kitchen preparing breakfast. "Hi, sweetie," my mom replied with a warm smile. "How did you sleep?" I heard a strange sound last night," I said hesitantly. "A strange sound?" my dad asked, placing a slice of bread in the toaster. "What did you hear?" "A crying, from under the bed," I replied, my words coming out more like a whisper. Lisa exchanged a glance with Tom, and they both burst out laughing. "Oh, honey, it's normal to feel scared in a new place. The house is old and makes noises. Don't worry about it," my mom said, stroking my hair. "But, Mom, I really heard it. It wasn't just my imagination." I protested, feeling a rising frustration. They didn't understand. "Sarah, you're probably just adjusting to the new house. Let's have some fun today. How about we explore the backyard?" my dad suggested, trying to change the subject. I tried to smile, but the unease still lingered within me. Breakfast passed, but instead of distracting me, the laughter and conversation only heightened my growing sense of loneliness. I felt trapped in a nightmare. After breakfast, we decided to go outside and explore the backyard. The space was huge, with tall trees and an old wooden swing creaking in the wind. I wondered how the house was before we arrived. There were so many memories that seemed to float in the air. "Let's play tag," I suggested, trying to cheer myself up. My parents agreed, and soon we were running around the lawn, but I could barely concentrate on the game. The crying still echoed in my mind, and I wondered if someone needed help. "Sarah, are you okay?" Lucas, a boy from the neighborhood, appeared out of nowhere, watching us with a curious smile. He looked a bit older and had messy hair, as if he had just come from an adventure. "Hi. I'm Sarah," I replied, trying to hide my worry. "Hi, Sarah. I'm Lucas. What are you doing here?" He had an infectious energy. "We're exploring the new house," I said, recalling what I had heard. "But I heard crying last night." Lucas raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Crying? Are you serious?" "Yes." From under the bed, I answered, trying not to let my fear show. He leaned in closer, his eyes shining with interest. "Do you want me to help you figure out what it is?" I hesitated, but the idea of having someone by my side gave me courage. "Yes, please. But, you won't tell anyone, right? My parents don't believe me." "Of course, it's our secret," Lucas promised with a mischievous smile. The day passed in a blur of playing, but the idea of exploring the mystery of the house kept me on edge. That night, as I returned to my room, the reality of the crying under my bed haunted me again. I realized it wasn't just a sound, it was a call for help, and I needed to find out what was happening. I tried to sleep, but anticipation and fear swirled in my chest. What had happened in that house before we arrived? Who was crying? I needed answers, and with Lucas by my side, maybe we could uncover the truth together. I still hadn't gotten used to the new house. The old Victorian structure, with its long corridors and creaky stairs, felt more like a labyrinth than a home. There was something magical yet terrifying about its walls. I loved exploring every corner, but with each passing day, I felt the house held secrets it didn't want to share. On a sunny afternoon, while my parents discussed the necessary renovations, I decided to explore a bit more. The smell of aged wood wrapped around me, and the soft glow of light filtering through the windows made me feel like I was in a fairy tale. But deep down, a sense of unease grew within me. I looked at my teddy bear, who accompanied me on all my adventures, and decided he deserved to know more about the house too. Taking advantage of my parents being busy, I went up to my room. When I entered, I noticed something was different. My teddy bear wasn't where I had left him. I went to the shelf and looked under the bed, but he was nowhere to be found. He must be somewhere else in the house, I thought, trying not to worry. After searching for a while, I decided to go downstairs to see if my parents had seen my teddy bear. But before I left, I heard a sound. A soft, sad crying echoed from beneath my bed. My heart raced. It must just be my imagination, I thought, trying to convince myself. But the sound persisted, as if someone were calling for me. I rushed down the stairs and found my parents in the kitchen. "Mom! Dad!" I heard a noise in my room. I shouted, trying to convey the urgency of the situation. "Sarah, sweetie, you must have dreamed it. The house is old and noisy. It's normal to hear strange things," my mom said with an encouraging smile. "But I swear I heard it. It's crying, like someone is needing help." I insisted, as frustration began to take over me. My dad laughed, ruffling my hair. "It's just your imagination, little one. How about we make a snack?" Hashtag. I tried to ignore what I had heard, but that night, as I settled into bed, the crying returned. With each sad note, I curled up tighter under the covers. I could hear the sound coming from beneath the bed, echoing from a place that felt both very distant and yet very close. The next morning, I was determined to figure out what was happening. After breakfast, I spent the day exploring the house, but the feeling of loneliness grew heavier. That was when I met Lucas. He lived next door, with messy blonde hair and a smile that radiated confidence. "Hey! You're new here, right?" Lucas asked while tossing a ball in the air. "I am. My name's Sarah," I replied, a bit shyly. "And you?" "Lucas. Want to play?" He threw the ball to me, and for a moment, I forgot about the crying. As we played, I decided to share with him what was happening. "Lucas, do you believe in ghosts?" He stopped playing and looked at me with curiosity. "Why do you ask that?" "It's just that. I hear crying at night. From under my bed. No one believes me, not even my parents," I confessed, feeling a mix of relief and fear as I spoke. "Wow, that's strange. We can investigate. I love ghost stories," Lucas exclaimed, his eyes shining with excitement. That was the first sign that I wasn't alone. Together, we decided to explore the house. Lucas seemed so enthusiastic that I couldn't help but smile. We headed to the attic, a place that had always intrigued me. The stairs creaked with each step, and the air was thick with the smell of mildew. "Look at these boxes," Lucas said excitedly as he pulled an old box from the corner. The letters were faded, but I could see they were letters. "Let's see what's inside," I suggested as he opened the box. Inside were several yellowed letters tied with a worn ribbon. Lucas began to read one of them aloud. "My dear, each day that passes without you is an eternity," he began, dramatically. "Wow, this sounds intense. Who do you think wrote it?" As Lucas read, I felt something stir inside me. The words seemed to echo in my mind as if they were connected to the crying I heard. Maybe these letters have something to do with what's happening, I thought, anxious. "Look, there are more letters in here. Let's read them all," Lucas said, excitedly pulling more papers from the box. As he read, I became engrossed in the story. The young woman writing the letters seemed deeply in love, but there was a tension in her words. What could be so forbidden that it caused such suffering? "This is a story of a forbidden love," I murmured, thinking about how people could hurt each other because of impossible loves. It must have been something serious. "Let's find out more about it." "Maybe the house has more secrets," Lucas replied, looking around as if he were on a treasure hunt. I looked at him, admiring the determination in his eyes. Not only was he helping me understand what was happening, but he was also making me feel like I wasn't alone. "Let's search more." I agreed, feeling like I was about to unearth something much bigger than just a love story. Together, we descended from the attic, carrying the letters and curiosity in our hearts. There was something in the house that called to us, and I knew I couldn't ignore it. The crying and the letters were just the beginning of a mystery that needed to be solved. In the following days, Lucas and I explored every corner of the house. He started to become a close friend, someone I could trust. We talked about everything, from our dreams to our insecurities. But the crying still lingered in the air, silent, like a forgotten lament. It was on a cloudy afternoon that we decided to go to the local library. The shelves were filled with dusty books, and the smell of old paper surrounded us. "There must be something here about the history of the house," Lucas said, looking at the shelves. We spent hours poring over books and documents until we found an old record that talked about the house and its former residents. "Look at this, Sarah," Lucas exclaimed, pointing to a passage that described a tragedy that occurred here many years ago. "It says that a young woman was condemned for something she didn't do. Her family betrayed her, and she disappeared," I read aloud, my heart racing. "That must be the reason for the crying I hear." Lucas fell silent, absorbing the information. "We need to find out more about her. Who was this young woman? What happened to her?" he questioned, with a determined look. That search for the truth was just beginning. I felt that, somehow, the young woman was trying to communicate with me. The crying I heard wasn't just an echo of pain, but a call for me to help her find peace. And I wouldn't stop until I uncovered the truth. I woke up on a cold night, the moon illuminating the room with a pale glow, and the atmosphere was heavy with an unsettling silence. The crying that used to echo from beneath my bed had become a familiar sound, but it was no less disturbing. I felt tired, yet a strange force kept me from falling back asleep. Something inside me knew I needed to understand what was happening, that there was a reason for that constant lament that seemed to resonate with pain and sadness. I slowly got out of bed, my bare feet touching the cold floor. I walked to the window and looked outside. The town was shrouded in a soft fog, and the trees swayed gently in the breeze. The moonlight made shadows dance on the ground, and for a moment, I lost myself in the beauty of the scene. But soon, the memory of the crying brought me back to reality. What could be happening? Who could be crying? The next day, as we had breakfast, I couldn't contain my anxiety. I looked at my parents, Tom and Lisa, who were discussing the house and the renovations needed. "Mom, Dad," I began hesitantly. I heard the crying again. My dad smiled at me, but there was a hint of concern in his eyes. "Sarah, honey, we've talked about this. It's normal to be scared in a new place. You'll get used to the house." Lisa nodded, trying to comfort me. "Yes, sweetie. You're just adjusting. Old houses have strange noises, but don't worry. It's all in your head." I felt a pang of frustration. How could they not understand? How could they ignore what I was experiencing? But it's not just my imagination. I heard it again. And it's not just the crying, sometimes things disappear and reappear in strange places, I said, trying to convince them. "You must be dreaming, dear," my mother said gently. "Let's focus on having fun in the new house, okay?" I bit my lip, trying not to let the tears fall. How could I make them believe me? After breakfast, I decided I needed a friend. That's when I met Lucas. He was a boy from the neighborhood, with messy hair and a smile that lit up his face. He was playing ball in the street, and I approached him hesitantly. "Hi, I'm Sarah," I said, trying to sound confident. "Hi, Sarah. I'm Lucas," he replied. "You moved into the Victorian house, right? I've heard some strange things about it. They say it's haunted." My heart raced. "You heard the stories too." I hear crying at night. And things disappear." Lucas frowned. "Really? I always thought they were just kid stories, but if you're really hearing it, that's kind of scary." I told him about my experiences, and Lucas listened attentively. "Let's find out more about the house," he suggested, determined. "Maybe we can uncover some clues about that crying." The idea excited me. Together, we decided to explore the attic of the house. I had looked there before but hadn't found anything interesting. However, with Lucas by my side, everything felt different. He was curious and brave, and I felt stronger with him. We climbed the dusty stairs, and as we opened the attic door, a musty smell filled our noses. The dim light from a hanging bulb illuminated old boxes and furniture covered with white sheets. As we began to investigate, Lucas started rummaging through one of the boxes. "Hey, look at this," he exclaimed, holding up some yellowed letters. Hashtag, 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 these are old letters. My heart raced. Whose are they? He began to open the letters, and the words seemed to dance before us. It looks like they're from a young woman named Eliza. She talks about a love she had. She says it was forbidden, but she can't stop thinking about him. My curiosity took over. What else does she say? Lucas continued reading aloud, and each word seemed to carry an emotional weight. She talks about how her parents didn't approve of the relationship. And that she met him in secret, in a place near the forest. With each sentence, I felt a growing connection to Eliza. Do you think this has to do with the crying? Maybe she's trapped in the house because of this unrequited love, I suggested, my mind buzzing with ideas. Maybe. We need to find out more about her, Lucas replied, looking around the attic. Let's see if we can find anything else. As we continued our search, I found a diary on a shelf covered in dust. Lucas, come here. Look at this. I said, pulling the diary close to us. Let's open it, he said, excitement gleaming in his eyes. The pages were yellowed and fragile, but the words were legible. I began to read aloud. Today I found my love again. He promised me that everything would be all right, but I know I can't trust my parents. They would never accept our love. But I can't live without him. This is so tragic, Lucas said, looking at me with an expression of understanding. She was truly struggling against something much bigger than herself. As I read, I realized that Eliza wasn't just talking about love, but about a deep pain that seemed to transcend time. She talks about feeling trapped, as if she can't escape her own life. It's like the house is keeping her here. Lucas nodded thoughtfully. That could explain the crying. If she never found peace, maybe she's stuck between worlds. I felt a chill run down my spine. How could we help Eliza? How could we free her? We need to understand more about what happened to her, Lucas said, his voice carrying a weight of determination. Let's go to the local library. There might be records about her family or something that explains the tragedy. I agreed, my heart pounding. It felt as if my connection to Eliza deepened with every step we took. We needed to find answers, not just for ourselves, but for her. So she could finally find the peace she so desperately sought. We arrived at the library, and as soon as we stepped inside, the smell of old books and the comforting silence enveloped me. It was a magical place, full of stories waiting to be discovered. Lucas and I headed to the local history section, starting to look for any mention of Eliza or the house. Look at this. Lucas exclaimed, pointing to a dusty book on the shelf. Stories of the city. It should have information about the old residents. We flipped through the book until we found a chapter about the Victorian house. The words described the history of its construction and mentioned a young woman named Eliza who had lived there. What shocked me most was the part that talked about a disaster that occurred many years ago. She was accused of something she didn't do. Her family betrayed her, and she was forced to leave the house, I said, my voice trembling. She was unjustly blamed. Lucas looked at me, wide-eyed. That's horrible. No wonder she's trapped. The crying must be her pain from not being understood. The weight of the revelation hit me hard. Eliza's story wasn't just about love, it was a tragedy of betrayal and sorrow. The house, which should have been a home, had become a prison. We need to tell my parents, I said, adrenaline coursing through my veins. They need to understand what's happening. But at the same time, doubt began to grow within me. What if they didn't believe us? What if the story was so deep that they couldn't handle the truth? I looked at Lucas, and he seemed to understand the internal struggle I was facing. Sarah, they need to know. If they hear Eliza's story, maybe we can convince them to help us free her, he said, with a serious look. With a sense of urgency, we decided to head back home and face reality. The crying was intensifying, and I knew I could no longer ignore it. Eliza's spirit was calling for help, and we were determined to uncover the truth that kept her trapped. Life in the new house had turned into a true nightmare. The nights were long and lonely, and darkness seemed to creep into every corner of the old Victorian mansion. I, Sarah, tried to adjust to the place, but with each passing day, the sad crying that echoed from beneath my bed grew stronger. My parents, Tom and Lisa, insisted it was just my imagination, that I was merely adjusting to a new house. But how could I explain the fear that settled in my chest every time the shadows danced on the walls? One sunny afternoon, after another night of nightmares, I knew I had to do something. The sound of crying still resonated in my mind, and I felt increasingly desperate. They need to understand, I thought, as I looked at my parents, who were discussing the necessary renovations in the house. "Sarah, dear, can you help us here?" my mother asked, trying to brush away the concern on my face. "We're organizing things." I hesitated, the anguish inside me growing. I didn't want to help. I wanted them to listen to me. "Mom, I heard it again. The crying. It's stronger," I said, my voice trembling. Tom looked at me, his well-meaning eyes confused. "Sarah, you know old houses make strange noises. It's just the wind, or maybe the pipes. You don't need to worry so much." He tried to comfort me, but the lack of understanding in his voice only made my heart tighten. That night, after another frustrating session of trying to convince them, I decided I needed help. I couldn't face this alone. That's when I met Lucas, a boy from the neighborhood. He seemed different, more interested in stories than just playing. During recess at school, I shared with him what was happening. "Did you really hear crying?" Lucas asked, his eyes wide with curiosity. "Yes. And it's not just that. Things disappear and reappear. My teddy bear went missing for 2 days and showed up on the shelf," I said, frustration spilling from my voice. Lucas leaned in closer, as if he were listening to a mysterious tale. "Let's investigate. This house might have an interesting story." The idea of investigating excited me. The next day, we decided to explore the attic, a place that always made me nervous. The stairs creaked under our feet, and cobwebs seemed to watch us as we climbed. The air was cold, and the faint light from Lucas's flashlight barely illuminated the dusty space. "Here!" Lucas exclaimed, pointing to an old box covered in dust. "Let's see what's inside." With trembling hands, I opened the box. Inside were yellowed letters, penned in the delicate handwriting of a woman. My heart raced as I read some of the words. "Look at this, Sarah," Lucas said, pulling a letter from the box. "It seems this house belonged to someone who fell in love with someone she couldn't have." The letters revealed a story of forbidden love, secret meetings, and whispered promises under the moonlight. But there was also a tone of sadness, a pain that seeped through the words. "What happened to her?" I asked, almost in a whisper, as Lucas flipped through the letters. "I don't know, but we need to find out more. Let's go to the library after school. They should have records about the house," Lucas suggested, determination shining in his eyes. That night, before falling asleep, dreams began to invade my mind. I saw the young woman from those letters, her sad expression and tear-filled eyes. She called my name, as if she were lost and needed help. I woke up startled, my heart racing, and the crying that echoed from beneath the bed seemed closer than ever. The next day, after school, I went with Lucas to the library. ####, the smell of old books and the deep silence of the place seemed to wrap us in a cloak of mystery. We began to sift through records and history books about the town. "Here," Lucas said, with a triumphant look. "This book mentions the house." He read aloud, and the story unfolded before us. The young woman who had written the letters was named Eliza. She fell in love with a man from a rival family, and the whole town was against them. The story ended in tragedy, but the details were vague. What really happened? Why was her spirit still trapped in the house? "They talk about a fire," Lucas said, his eyes wide. "And about betrayal." Those words echoed in me, and I knew I had to tell my parents. Who knows, if they learned the story, they might finally believe me. But the thought that they might not believe me again left me anxious. That night, I decided it was time to confront them again. "Mom, Dad, I need to talk to you," I said, entering the living room where they were discussing renovation plans. "What is it, Sarah?" my mother asked, worry etched on her face. "I discovered something important about the house," I said, trying to stay calm. Tom looked at me, and for a brief moment, I saw a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "What did you find, dear?" "It's about a young woman named Eliza. She lived here and she's trapped here," I exclaimed, emotion spilling over. "I heard her crying. She needs help." "Sarah, you're just letting your imagination run wild," Lisa said, her voice soft yet firm. "No," I shouted, feeling frustration and desperation swell within me. "I'm not making this up. Lucas and I found letters and records. Please, believe me." My dad looked at my mom, and I could see they were divided. "Sarah, why don't you show us these letters?" he finally said, his tone a mix of skepticism and curiosity. "I can do better," I said, trying to keep hope alive. "I can show you everything we found." That night, I took my parents to the attic. The air was thick with tension, and I felt this was the decisive moment. Lucas was already there, holding the letters and the diary we had found. "Look," I said, pointing to the box. "Here are Eliza's letters." Tom picked up one of the letters and began to read aloud. The silence that followed was palpable. Each word seemed to echo in the room, and I could feel my heart racing. This is sad," my mother murmured, her eyes misty. When Tom finished reading, he looked at me, and for the first time, I saw recognition in his eyes. "You really believe this, don't you, Sarah?" he asked softly. "Yes," I affirmed, hope beginning to blossom within me. "She needs help to find peace." Tom and Lisa exchanged glances, and a wave of emotion seemed to pass between them. "Sarah, we're going to investigate this together," my mother said, with renewed determination. "We will find out what happened to Eliza." And in that moment, feeling the connection between us, I realized that they were finally ready to listen. The crying that echoed from beneath the bed no longer felt so distant, and I knew we were about to uncover the truth that could free the young woman trapped in that house. The night enveloped the Victorian house like a dark and heavy cloak, and the moonlight filtered timidly through the dusty windows, casting dancing shadows in the corners of the rooms. The silence was profound, except for the faint whisper of the wind passing through the cracks in the old walls. Sitting on the attic floor, my heart racing, I looked at Lucas, who was by my side. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, a mix of fear and hope. "Are you ready for this, Sarah?" Lucas asked, breaking the silence that surrounded us. His eyes sparkled with a mix of curiosity and nervousness. He had always been brave, but I could see he was also apprehensive. "I don't know, Lucas. What if something goes wrong?" My voice trembled slightly, but I knew I couldn't give up now. I needed to understand what was happening, why that crying had chosen me. The young woman who appeared in my dreams had a plea, and I was determined to help her. "No matter what happens, I'll be here with you," he assured me, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. That simple action gave me courage. I wasn't alone, and together we could face whatever lay lurking in the shadows. With a deep sigh, I took some candles we had brought and lit them one by one, forming a small circle on the wooden floor. The flames cast flickering lights on the walls, and the darkness seemed to recede a little, as if the light was pushing away the shadows. "Let's do this," I declared, feeling a wave of determination coursing through my body. "Yeah, let's go," Lucas replied, his voice now steady. He sat facing me, also within the circle of light. "What do you think we should do first?" Maybe we should call the spirit." "Say her name if we know it," I suggested, remembering the letters we found in the attic. "The young woman who lived here, her name was Eloisa." "Eloisa," Lucas repeated, as if absorbing the weight of that name. "Let's call her then. Eloisa, if you're here, please manifest yourself." The atmosphere grew heavy, and a sudden chill swept through the space. I looked at Lucas, who also seemed to feel the change. "Did you feel that?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Yeah, it's like something is drawing near," he replied, his expression intense. The candle flames began to flicker erratically, as if an invisible breeze was blowing through the attic. "Eloisa, we're here to help you," I shouted, trying to connect with her. "If you can hear our voices, please show us you're here." A profound silence followed, interrupted only by the sound of my heart racing. I was about to lose hope when suddenly, a soft, sorrowful sound began to echo through the attic. It was the same crying I had heard on previous nights, but now it felt closer, more intense. I could feel the pain that accompanied it, a deep sadness that filled the air. "Sarah," Lucas whispered, his eyes wide with surprise. "Are you hearing this?" "Yes, it's her. It's Eloisa," I exclaimed, my heart racing. "She's here." The crying grew louder, and a cold presence enveloped the room, making the hairs on my arms stand on end. "Eloisa, we want to help you," I shouted, trying to connect with her. "Please, tell us what you need." Then, suddenly, a strong breeze swept through the attic, extinguishing some of the candles. The space grew dark, and an intense cold surrounded us. Lucas and I exchanged glances, fear now taking hold of us. But I wasn't going to give up. "Eloisa, we need to know, why are you trapped here?" At that moment, the light of one of the remaining candles began to flicker, and an ethereal figure started to form before us. It was a young woman, with long dark hair and an old-fashioned dress that seemed to float. Her eyes were filled with sadness, and I realized it was Eloisa herself. "Why are you here?" I asked, my voice choked with emotion. "How can we help you?" The young woman raised her hand, and the crying transformed into a deep lament. "The pain, the betrayal. I can't rest," she said, her voice a whisper that seemed to come from far away. "I was accused of something I didn't do. My family, they didn't believe me." Lucas and I fell silent, absorbing her words. What she was saying made sense. The story we found in the letter spoke of a forbidden love, but also of a tragic misunderstanding that led to her death. "Eloisa, we want to help you find peace," I said, determined. "Please, tell us what you need." "Free me from the pain," she replied, her expression now full of pleading. "I am not just a shadow. I am a story, a life interrupted. The truth needs to be revealed." ####. I looked at Lucas, and he nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "We will help her, Eloisa. We promise," he said, firm in his decision. The young woman smiled sadly, and the atmosphere around us seemed to vibrate with intense energy. Her crying had turned into a scream of pain, and I could feel her anguish pulsing in the air. "The truth burns like fire. Find what has been hidden. Only then can I be free." Those words echoed in my mind. What was hidden? What more could we uncover? I knew we needed to investigate further, but for that, we needed our family's help. "Eloisa, we will do whatever it takes. We will find the truth," I promised, feeling a wave of determination. "Thank you," the young woman whispered, her image beginning to fade slowly. The light of truth, will set us all free." And with that, her presence disappeared, leaving behind a deep silence and a void. I looked at Lucas, who was still in shock from what had just happened. "We have to tell my parents. They need to know about Eloisa, about what happened," I said, urgency in my voice. "Yes, but first we need to learn more about her story. What happened to her family?" Lucas replied, already thinking about the next steps. "Let's go back to the attic tomorrow and look for more clues. We have to find more letters, more information. Something that can help us understand the truth," I suggested, feeling that time was running out. "Alright, but now we need to get out of here. It's late, and I don't want your parents to worry," Lucas said, standing up and reaching out his hand to me. I took it, and together we began to move away from the attic, but not without taking one last look at the space where Eloisa had been. What she had lived through was now a part of our history, and I was determined to help her find peace, no matter what it took. Night had fallen over the old Victorian house, and the air was thick with an oppressive silence. I remembered every corner of the house, every shadow that seemed to move when I wasn't looking. Tom and Lisa, my parents, were occupied with discussions that echoed through the halls, but I couldn't concentrate on their words. The only thing filling my thoughts was the crying I heard every night, a deep lament that seemed to come from a forgotten place beneath my bed. That night, as the house creaked with the wind, my parents decided to investigate the source of the sound. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or scared. Maybe they'll finally see that I'm not just a child with a vivid imagination, I thought, peeking through the crack in my bedroom door. They were in the living room, their faces illuminated by the soft light of the lamp, and I could see the tension in their expressions. "Did you hear that again, Tom?" Lisa asked, concern evident in her voice. "What do you think it could be?" "I don't know, Lisa. It could just be the wind, or maybe the old pipes in the house. But, it's strange, isn't it?" He hesitated, taking a step toward the hallway that led to my room. "Let's take a look." My heart raced. I knew they weren't just hearing the crying, they were starting to accept it. I hid behind the door, my hand trembling as I held it. The sound was louder now, a sad melody that seemed to be calling for me. "Sarah," my dad called, his voice echoing in the hallway. "Are you in there?" I didn't respond. I just took a deep breath, trying to control the fear growing inside me. Then, I heard Lisa whisper something to Tom. "Do you think this has to do with the house's history?" "It could be. The seller mentioned something about strange events, but I thought it was just an old tale. I don't know if we should be afraid of this, but we need to understand what's going on," he replied, his voice heavy with uncertainty. The crying intensified, and I couldn't stay quiet any longer. I stepped out of the darkness of my room and walked toward the living room. "Mom, Dad." I called, and they turned to me, surprised. "Sarah, are you okay?" Lisa asked, worried. I heard it again. The crying, it's real. I didn't know how else to explain. It's not just my imagination. Tom looked at my mom, and his expression was a mix of confusion and concern. "Sarah, we heard it too. We were trying to figure out what it could be. Do you remember what you said about the spirit that lives here?" I nodded, the memory of my conversations with Lucas flooding back. "Yes. She needs help. Please believe me." Lisa crouched down next to me, looking into my eyes. "Sweetheart, we want to believe you. But what do you suggest we do?" "We need to investigate more. We need to look where I found the diary and the letters. There might be more things we don't know yet," I suggested, an idea forming in my mind. Tom hesitated, but then nodded. "All right. Let's do it together. This is important." We all went up to the attic, the stairs creaking under our feet. The air up there was colder, and I could feel the electricity in the atmosphere. When we arrived, I looked around, remembering the first time Lucas and I had been there. The diary was hidden among some dusty boxes, and Tom's flashlight illuminated its yellowed pages. "Do you remember where you found this?" he asked, running his hand over the boxes. "If I'm not mistaken, you said you found it in the left corner." "Yes," I exclaimed, eager. "There. By the window." As we searched, the crying returned, stronger and more anguished than before. Lisa looked around, her eyes wide. "It's as if the house is alive, as if it's calling to us," she said, her voice trembling. "I feel that too," I replied, my heart racing. "It wants us to understand." Finally, we found the diary. It was covered in dust, and when I opened it, the smell of aged paper filled my nostrils. The pages were filled with words written in delicate handwriting, and as my parents and I began to read, the crying became almost a scream. This is her story," I murmured, my fingers gliding over the pages. "She was in love with someone her family didn't accept. And it ended badly, Tom said, his voice low as he continued to read. Look, there's a date here. It seems everything happened many years ago, a forbidden love. She was trapped here because of that. Because of what happened, I said, sadness flooding my heart. She needs peace. Lisa closed her eyes, as if trying to understand the pain of the young woman who had written those words. What can we do? She asked, her voice almost a whisper. We need to help her find that peace. We can't leave her alone, I replied, determined. She doesn't deserve this. At that moment, the crying intensified, and I realized it wasn't just a distant sound, it was a call, a plea for help that echoed not only through the house but within us. It was almost as if the young woman was trying to tell us something. Let's do this together, Tom said, looking at me and Lisa. Whatever the path, we will do it as a family. I nodded, feeling a thread of hope. We had to help the young woman, and perhaps by doing so, we could also resolve the issues that haunted our own family. The fights, the tension, all of that could be healed if we could free the spirit. Let's look for more information and do something for her, I suggested. Maybe a small ceremony, so she can finally be free. Lisa and Tom nodded in agreement. Yes, we'll do that. We need to find a way to honor her story, Tom said, determined. As we prepared for what was to come, the crying calmed, as if the house itself was listening to our promises. I knew we had a lot to do, but for the first time, I felt we weren't alone on this journey. The young woman, even in her pain, would guide us. And together, we could bring peace not only to her but to ourselves. The night was darker than usual, and the silence in the Victorian house felt more oppressive. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to ignore the crying echoing beneath it. Hashtag, it was an agonizing feeling, as if someone was desperately calling for help and I couldn't do anything to assist. The thought that my parents didn't believe me left me even more distraught. They always said it was just my imagination, that it was all a product of a child's mind. But how could I forget the sound? It was there, night after night, and now it seemed more intense, more urgent. I got out of bed, determined to talk to my parents. I needed them to see what was happening, to understand that it wasn't just a silly childhood fear. When I reached the living room, I found my dad, Tom, sitting on the couch with a tired expression, while my mom, Lisa, was in the kitchen organizing some things. Hi, Mom. Dad. I called, trying to get their attention. I need to talk to you. Tom turned to me, a gentle smile on his face. Hi, Sarah. What's up, sweetheart? It's about the crying, under the bed. It's real, I promise. My voice came out louder than I intended, and I quickly realized I was almost pleading. Please, you need to listen. Lisa appeared in the living room with a worried expression. Sarah, dear, you've talked about this before. It's normal to feel scared in a new place. Don't worry so much, everything will be fine. But it's not just that. I heard it again tonight, and it's not just fear. I feel like someone needs help. I could feel the tears starting to form. I didn't want to seem weak, but I was so tired of being ignored. Tom stood up and approached me, kneeling to be at my level. Sarah, listen. I know you're going through a tough time, but you need to understand that the house is old. It makes noises, and your brain might just be filling in the gaps with fear. Let's make a deal. You promise to try to relax, and I promise to make sure the house is in good shape, okay? No, Dad. It's not just noise. It's crying. Please believe me. I was becoming frustrated, and the feeling of loneliness grew with each word that left my mouth. I found strange things too. My teddy bear disappeared for a while and showed up in places I didn't leave it. Lisa looked at Tom, and I saw her expression shift from concern to skepticism. Honey, you must have just forgotten where you left it. That happens to all of us. How about we talk about something else? What do you say to a movie? The idea of a movie didn't excite me. The crying continued, and I couldn't concentrate on anything other than that. No, Mom. That won't work. I need you to believe me. I'm not crazy. Tom looked at me, his eyes reflecting a mix of empathy and doubt. I know you're feeling this way, but the truth is you're still very young. There's so much you don't understand about the world around us. Let's think of a solution together, okay? How about we do something fun tomorrow? Frustration took over me. That's not what I want. I want you to help me figure out what's going on. I can't do this alone. At that moment, anger and sadness swirled inside me. I didn't know what else to do. I wanted them to see the truth. Why was it so hard? I went back to my room, feeling like I had failed. I sat on the edge of my bed and let the tears flow down my face. The crying continued, and I wondered if the young girl trapped under my bed felt the same way. The next day, school felt like a temporary refuge. I needed to see Lucas, the boy who had become my friend. He was different, he believed me. As I walked to his house, my heart raced. What would I say? How would I explain all of this? When I arrived, Lucas was on the porch, playing with a small remote-controlled car. He waved at me, and I approached, trying to hide the tension building in my chest. Hi, Sarah. How are you? He smiled, but I could see he noticed something was wrong. Hi, Lucas. I need to talk to you. It's serious. It's about the house. I sat down next to him, swallowing hard. I think something is really wrong. I heard the crying again. He turned his gaze to me, his eyes widening with curiosity. Really? What do you mean by that? It's like someone is down there, calling for help. My parents don't believe me, and I feel so alone. Trust me, Sarah, I'll help you. Let's investigate that house. The enthusiasm in his voice gave me a bit of hope. I've heard some stories about it. Seems like the house has a dark past. Have you heard anything that could help us? The thought that Lucas also had knowledge about the place excited me. Some neighbors talk about a young girl who lived here a long time ago. She fell in love with a boy from a different social class, and her family never accepted the relationship. They say she became sad, and a tragedy happened. The house was marked by it. We need to find out more. Let's go to the attic. I was determined. Together, we could find the answers we sought. We climbed the stairs to the attic, and the air was thick with the smell of dust and mildew. Boxes were piled in one corner, and I could feel a strange energy in the air. As I opened one box, Lucas began searching another. Sarah, look at this. He held up an old box and opened it. Inside were yellowed letters, some faded by time. These are love letters. My heart raced. Read one of them. He began reading aloud, and the story unfolded before us. It was about a forbidden love, filled with promises and dreams but also pain and despair. I could feel the sadness in the words, and a wave of compassion washed over me. It seems they loved each other so much, but had to fight against everything and everyone. It's so sad, I sighed, imagining what it would be like to live through something so intense and still have to deal with rejection. If they loved each other so much, why didn't they stay together? Lucas asked, looking at me with a thoughtful expression. Maybe her family wouldn't allow it. Sometimes people make wrong decisions out of fear or prejudice. I was beginning to understand that the pain I felt inside the house wasn't just mine, it was something that had passed through that young girl who was still trapped there. We need to find out what happened after that. What made the girl stay trapped here? Lucas was as engaged as I was. Let's search more. We continued to rummage through the boxes, and the more we found, the more stories seemed to surface. But what truly worried me was how I could help the girl find peace. I couldn't shake the feeling that, if she had suffered so much, maybe I could do something for her too. Lucas, what if we go together to talk to my parents? They need to understand that something more is happening here. I can't do this alone. The desperation in my voice was evident. Are you sure? They might not believe us, but if we don't try, we'll never know. I can't stay in this agonizing loneliness. I need them by my side, just like you're with me. Determination filled my heart, and I was ready to face whatever came next. When we returned home, my heart raced. I knew this conversation would be difficult, but it was necessary. As soon as I walked in, I found Tom and Lisa in the living room, discussing something I couldn't clearly hear. But the tone of their voices was raised, and it made me nervous. Dad, Mom. Can I talk to you? My voice trembled, but I knew it was now or never. They both turned to me, and for a moment, silence fell. What is it, Sarah? My dad asked, his expression shifting from concern to curiosity. Lucas and we found some things about the house, and we need you to listen to us. It's serious. We have to discover what happened to the girl who lived here. Lisa furrowed her brow, and Tom looked at me, clearly skeptical. The atmosphere in the Victorian house was thick with tension and expectation. The twilight was turning into night, and the sun was hiding behind the trees, leaving the house enveloped in dancing shadows. Hashtag. Sarah felt nervous but also determined. What she was about to do was something she had never imagined she would have the courage to carry out. Beside her, Lucas was equally anxious, but his gaze was one of understanding. He knew how much this moment meant to Sarah. Are we ready for this? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. The attic, where we planned to hold the letting go ceremony, seemed even more ominous under the faint light of the lantern. Yes, we are. We need to do this for her, Sarah, Lucas replied, his tone firm, giving me a bit more courage. She needs us. I took a deep breath, trying to push away the fear that was spreading in my chest. I didn't know exactly how the ceremony would unfold, but I felt it was the only way to help the spirit of the young woman who had called out to me so many times. She wasn't just a spirit, she was a part of me now. I could feel her pain, her lament, and I knew that somehow, we would manage to free her. We climbed the stairs to the attic, where the air was colder and the silence felt deeper. Lucas and I sat on the floor in an open space, away from any objects that might distract us. The lantern's light illuminated the surroundings, revealing cobwebs and dusty boxes, remnants of a time long past. The strong smell of old paper and aged wood was overwhelming, but somehow, it made me feel closer to the young woman. Let's begin, Lucas said, breaking the silence. He had read about letting go rituals and wanted to do something simple but meaningful. Let's form a circle and focus on her energy. I nodded, and together, we started arranging some candles we found in one of the boxes. We lit them one by one, watching as the flames danced and flickered against the walls. This will help guide her, I murmured, still a bit hesitant about what we were about to do. Yes, and we need to connect with her. Let's think about everything we've discovered and how we can help her, Lucas explained, his voice calm and serene. He turned to me, holding my hand. We'll do this together. I closed my eyes, allowing the silence to envelop me. I concentrated on the young woman, on the pain she felt and the sadness that echoed under my bed every night. The soft crying seemed closer now, as if she were waiting for us. We're here, I whispered. We're ready to help you. The atmosphere began to shift. The cold intensified, and a gentle breeze swept through the attic, causing the candle flames to flicker. Lucas and I exchanged glances, and I could see the same determination in his eyes. She's here, he said, his voice slightly raised. Feel her presence. It was then that the crying intensified, no longer a distant whisper but a deep lament resonating throughout the house. It felt as if the house itself was crying alongside the young woman. Do you feel that? I asked, my voice faltering. She's getting closer. Yes, I feel it, Lucas replied, his expression turning serious. We need to continue. Let's talk to her. I knelt on the floor, still holding Lucas's hand. Spirit of the young woman who calls for me, we've come here to help you. If you can hear us, we want you to know that you're not alone. The crying stopped suddenly, and a heavy silence fell over us. My senses were on high alert, and I could feel a presence, a pulsing energy around us. The atmosphere was charged, as if the house itself were breathing with anticipation. Please, reveal yourself, Lucas requested, his voice full of respect. We're here for you. A cold wind blew, making the candles tremble violently. The light flickered, and for a moment, I could see nothing but darkness. But then, a figure began to form before us. It was an ethereal image of a young woman, her pale face and sad eyes. She looked so real, so close, that I could almost touch her. Sarah, the young woman whispered, her voice like a distant echo, yet filled with emotion. You heard my cry. Yes, I heard, I replied, my heart racing. We're here to help you. We want you to find peace. She looked at me, her eyes filled with pain and suffering. I can't leave. My story, my love, they've trapped me here. What story? Lucas asked, his voice steady. What happened to you? The young woman hesitated, as if struggling to find the words. I was accused of something I didn't do. My family, they didn't believe me. They betrayed me. I just wanted to be with him. Who was he? I inquired, feeling her sadness envelop me. Who was he? The man I loved, she replied, a tear rolling down her cheek. We were happy, but the world wouldn't allow it. They separated us, and I was left here, with this pain. I just wanted to be free. My heart ached at her words. She didn't deserve this tragedy, this emotional prison. We will help you, I promised, feeling the connection between us grow stronger. We will help you find peace. You need to let go of the past, Lucas added softly. We want you to find freedom. What do we need to do? The young woman looked at us, her expression beginning to change, as if hope was slowly seeping into her heart. I need you to help me forgive. Not just them, but myself. I can't leave if I'm still carrying this pain. We will help you forgive, I said, determination rising within me. We will do this together. Lucas and I moved closer to her, forming a circle of light and love. Let's focus on your pain and transform it into something beautiful, I suggested. Let's help you free yourself from this sadness. Yes, Lucas agreed, and together we began to recite words of comfort, expressing our intention to liberate her. You are more than the accusations made against you. The love you felt is real and will always be. The young woman began to glow with a soft light, and I felt an energy warming our circle. Thank you, she whispered, and the emotion in her voice was palpable. Thank you for listening to me. The crying that had once been of sorrow transformed into a sound of relief, as if the chains binding her were being broken. The atmosphere around us began to vibrate, and the candles danced with an intensity one had never seen before. The attic was filled with a golden light that enveloped the young woman, and I felt that freedom was near. We're with you, I said, encouraging her. You don't have to carry this burden anymore. Yes, you deserve to be free, Lucas added, his voice filled with emotion. Let go of what holds you back. With one last look, the young woman smiled, and the light around her intensified. I can finally leave, she said, her voice full of gratitude. Thank you. And in that moment, the crying transformed into a scream of liberation, and the house trembled as if shedding years of accumulated pain. The chains that held her captive were breaking, and the young woman began to fade into a soft glow. Go in peace, I murmured, tears streaming down my face. You will always be remembered. And with that, she disappeared, leaving behind a feeling of calm and serenity I had never felt before. The attic, once filled with sadness, was now enveloped in a warm and welcoming light. We three sat in silence, absorbing what had just happened. "We did it," Lucas said, still in shock but with a smile on his face. "We really did it." "Yes," I replied, feeling a deep satisfaction in my heart. "She is free now." The house felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from its shoulders. And as we sat in the attic, surrounded by the soft light of the candles, I knew that that night would change our lives forever. The tension in the air was palpable. I could feel my heart racing as we prepared for the letting go ceremony. The attic, which had once seemed like a scary and lonely place, was now a sanctuary where we hoped to free the spirit of the young woman who had called out to us. Lucas and I exchanged glances, both aware that we were about to do something very important, not just for ourselves but also for that tormented soul. Tom and Lisa stood beside us, holding each other's hands, their faces a mixture of fear and hope. The dim candlelight we had lit cast dancing shadows on the walls, and the air felt colder than usual. "Are you ready, Sarah?" Lucas asked, his voice a whisper almost lost in the silence surrounding us. I don't know," I replied, trying to contain my nervousness. "What if it doesn't work? What if she gets trapped forever?" The thought that everything we had done so far could be in vain left me feeling anguished. "If we don't try, we'll never know," Lucas said, his gaze resolute. He always had this ability to encourage me, to make me feel that even in the darkest situations, there was a light to be found. "Let's do this together." As we began the ceremony, I held the diary of the young woman we had found, filled with secrets and pain. The pages were yellowed, but the ink was still legible. It was as if the words were reaching out to me, wanting to tell the story that still remained untold. "Let's read aloud," I suggested, and everyone nodded. With a trembling voice, I started to read the passages that spoke of love, betrayal, and despair. "She felt so alone," I commented as the words flowed. "No one listened to her, no one believed her." Each sentence seemed to echo the cries I had heard so many times before. The air was thick with emotion, and as the words left my mouth, I could feel the presence of the young woman drawing closer. "You remember what she said, don't you?" Lucas asked, looking into my eyes. "She needs help to find peace." "Yes," I replied, already sensing the energy around us shifting. The candle flickered, and the cold seemed to intensify. "She can't stay here forever." "Let's do this," Tom said, his voice filled with determination, breaking the tension. "We're with you, Sarah." The ceremony continued, and as we kept reading, the atmosphere in the attic grew more intense. The crying, which had been a soft lament, began to intensify, echoing like a deep wail. It was as if the house itself was crying, feeling the pain of the young woman who had been trapped for so long. "It's happening!" I shouted. "She's here!" A gust of wind swept through us, making the candles flicker and the cold become almost unbearable. I could feel her presence, like a whisper in the air, something on the verge of revealing itself. "Please," I cried, "if you're here, show us what you need." The room fell silent for a moment, and then the crying transformed into a scream. It was a scream of pain, of despair, something that felt like it transcended time and space. The house trembled around us, and I held tightly to Lucas and my parents. They were my anchor amidst the turmoil. "We're here with you," Lucas shouted, his voice strong. "You're not alone." And then, amidst the chaos, the figure of the young woman appeared before us. She was ethereal, a shadow wrapped in a soft glow. Her eyes, filled with sadness and pain, met mine. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice echoing in our minds. "Thank you for listening to me." Tears began to slide down my face. "We want to help you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have to stay trapped here." The young woman shook her head, and an expression of gratitude lit up her face. I was condemned for something I didn't do. My family, they didn't believe me. Her voice was a lament, and I could feel her pain as if it were my own. I needed someone to know the truth. Tom, hearing her words, looked at me and then at the young woman. "What do you need?" he asked, his voice full of compassion. "How can we help you find peace?" The spirit of the young woman gazed at us, and I felt a wave of sadness. I just wanted someone to know the truth. That I wasn't the villain everyone thought I was. "You're not," I said firmly. "We know. We read your diary. We understand." A wave of empathy washed over me, and her lament seemed to dissipate, giving way to a fragile hope. "You are different," she said, her voice floating like a gentle breeze. "You listen. You believed." There was a lightness in her words, as if the weight of centuries was about to be lifted from her shoulders. "Let's free her," Lucas said, and I knew he was right. It was time to give her what she longed for. "Let's perform the ceremony, and you can finally rest." The young woman nodded, and in her eyes, I saw a glimmer of hope. "Please," she implored. "Help me find peace." Joining our voices, we began to recite words of release, something we learned about how to free spirits trapped in this world. "May you find the light," I said, and as I spoke, the energy in the attic shifted again. It felt like a storm was forming, but this storm was not of fear, it was of liberation. The environment grew colder, and the crying transformed into a soft whisper. The young woman began to glow, and around her, the darkness that had held her captive seemed to dissipate. "Thank you," she said, her voice now clear and full of emotion. "Finally, I can go." Tears streamed down my face as I watched her transform into a gentle light, a glow that filled the attic with warmth and love. "You will be remembered," I promised, my voice choked with emotion. "You will not be forgotten." "I will never be far," she replied, and as the light enveloped her, I realized she was shedding the pain and suffering that had kept her trapped for so long. "I will always be with you, in the memories we create and the moments we share." And then, with one last smile, she vanished, leaving behind a sense of peace that filled the air around us. The crying ceased, and the attic, which had once been a place of pain, was now a sanctuary of light and hope. "We did it," I said, looking at Lucas and my parents, who were as emotional as I was. "We helped her." "Yes," Lucas replied, his expression filled with relief. "She's free now." Tom and Lisa embraced each other, and I joined them, feeling the bond of our family. The house, which had once felt like a place of despair, had transformed back into a home. "We will always remember her," Lisa said, stroking my hair. "She can finally rest." "Yes," I agreed, feeling a wave of gratitude. "She deserves it." And in that moment, I knew that despite the difficulties, life always brought new hopes, and that together, we could face any challenge that lay ahead. The emotions were still running high after the ceremony. The house, which had once felt like a labyrinth of pain and sadness, now breathed relief. The spirit of the young woman had found peace, and I felt that somehow, our own story was intertwining with hers. But even with the feeling of freedom in the air, a shadow lingered over me, a troubling thought I couldn't shake. I was in the attic with Sarah and her parents when Lucas stepped away from the group, his expression distant. He seemed lost in his own thoughts, and I could see the internal struggle he was facing. I decided to approach him, pulling him aside for a conversation. "Lucas, are you okay?" I asked, worried by his silence. He took a deep breath, as if preparing to reveal a secret that had been tormenting him. "Actually, I'm not. There's something I need to tell you, and it could change everything between us." My heart began to race. "What do you mean by that?" Lucas hesitated, looking down as if the old floorboards of the house held the answer. I'm a descendant of the family that betrayed the young woman. My grandfather was responsible for the tragedy that happened here." Those words hit me like a bombshell. The air seemed to drain from my lungs. "What? How do you know this?" I found some information while researching the history of the house. When you and Sarah told me about the spirit, I started putting the pieces together. My grandfather was one of the men involved in the story. He betrayed the young woman, and that caused all the pain she endured. But that means you're part of the pain she suffered. I could barely articulate the words. ####. Lucas nodded, his gaze reflecting the pain he felt. I'm not guilty for what he did, but in a way, I'm responsible for carrying this weight. It's like history is repeating itself, and I'm destined to face it. Those revelations left me conflicted. I had grown closer to Lucas, and now I saw him as part of the problem that had plagued that house. So why didn't you tell me before? Why didn't you say you had this connection? I didn't know how you would react. I didn't want you to see me as a villain, as someone carrying guilt. I just wanted to be your friend and help Sarah find peace. I felt a wave of compassion for him. What he was facing was as difficult as what Sarah and I had experienced. Lucas, you're not your grandfather. You can't be held responsible for his actions. What matters is what you do now. But what if this connection is why we can't rid ourselves of this pain? What if I'm the cause of the sadness in this house? He looked into my eyes, and I could see the struggle he was facing. I don't believe you're the cause. The story of the young woman isn't about you. It's about the love and pain she lived through. And now that we know the truth, we can change that. We can help heal not only the house but also ourselves. Lucas seemed to reflect on my words, and I could see a small glimmer of hope beginning to shine in his eyes. Do you really believe we can change this? Yes, I believe. We can confront the past together. We can unite to put an end to this story of pain. You don't have to carry this burden alone. He smiled, an expression of gratitude and relief. Thank you, that means a lot to me. That conversation brought us closer together, and we decided that we needed to confront the past, not only to free the spirit of the young woman but also to heal our own wounds. We needed to discover more about the story that had connected us in such an unexpected way. We returned to the rest of the family, where Sarah was explaining everything that had happened during the ceremony to our parents. The atmosphere was heavy with emotion, and I knew that despite everything, we were all closer than ever. Sarah, do you remember anything else about the young woman? I asked, trying to steer the conversation toward our search for answers. She looked at me, her eyes shining with determination. I remembered a part from the diary we read. The young woman talked about a place in the forest where she used to meet the man she loved. There might be more about her story there. Tom and Lisa, who had been listening intently, exchanged worried glances. Do you think you should go there? Tom asked, his voice heavy with apprehension. Yes, we need to understand everything that happened. We can't let the pain of the past continue to haunt us, I said, looking at Lucas, who nodded in agreement. Let's go together, Lisa suggested, her determination reflected in her eyes. We want to help. With this new mission in mind, we headed toward the forest surrounding the house. The path was winding, lined with tall trees that seemed to watch our steps. The air was thick with mystery, and I could feel the energy pulsing around us. When we reached a clearing, a place marked by silence and natural beauty, Sarah pointed to an ancient tree. She mentioned a tree like this in the diary. This is where she would meet him. We observed the tree, and something about its trunk seemed different, as if it held secrets. We need to look for something, maybe a clue, Lucas said, scanning the area. Carefully, we began to investigate. The ground was covered in dry leaves, and the smell of damp earth filled our nostrils. After a few minutes of searching, Sarah exclaimed, "Look!" She bent down and picked up an object from the ground, a small wooden box. It had an aged shine but seemed lovingly crafted. What do you think is inside? With trembling hands, I opened the box. Inside, we found a delicate necklace, with a heart-shaped pendant. It's beautiful, I murmured, admiring the piece. It must have been a gift from the man she loved, Lucas said, his expression shifting to a mixture of sadness and understanding. This could be a symbol of the love she never had the chance to fully live. We need to take it back. This could be the key to freeing her once and for all, Sarah suggested, and we all agreed. We returned home, the box securely in Sarah's hands. As soon as we arrived in the attic, where it all began, a profound silence enveloped us. The atmosphere was charged, and I could feel we were about to take a crucial step in our journey. Let's do the ceremony again, but this time, we'll include the necklace. It represents the truth we need to share, I said, looking at all the faces surrounding me. Sarah nodded, her eyes filled with determination. The young woman needs to know her story won't be forgotten. That we will honor her. Together, we positioned ourselves in a circle, with the necklace in the center. The lit candles around us cast dancing shadows on the attic walls, creating an atmosphere of tension and anticipation. Dear young woman, I began, we found something that belongs to you. This necklace is a symbol of the love you lost, and we are here to acknowledge your pain and set you free. The temperature in the room began to shift, and a light breeze blew, causing the candle flames to flicker. We are here to give voice to your story. We want you to know that you are not alone, Sarah spoke, her voice steady and full of emotion. The crying that had resonated in the house began to intensify, but now there was something different about it. It was as if the pain was transforming into a lament of relief. The spirit of the young woman seemed to be present, and I could feel the connection growing between us. You are loved, and your story will be told. We honor your life and your struggle, Lucas said, holding Sarah's hand. That declaration seemed to echo in the house, and a soft light began to shine around us, as if the house itself was responding to our call. The crying turned into a whisper, and the energy that had once been heavy was now filled with hope. Thank you, a delicate voice sounded, and we all froze, looking toward the center of the circle. The young woman appeared, her ethereal presence illuminating the attic. Thank you for freeing me. Thank you for listening to me. Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she looked at the spirit. We will never forget you. Your story will live in our hearts. The spirit smiled, and a radiant peace enveloped the room. Now you have a new beginning. The pain will no longer be a burden, but a lesson of love.